Pope Francis is shocking faithful Catholics with yet another well-publicized display of his support for the pro-LGBT cause. But is he signaling the direction in which the Synod is heading? Join us with the latest from the Eternal City, Church Militant Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomez. Jules, just yesterday we reported on Rome Dispatch that Pope Francis' handwritten letter to a well-known Catholic LGBT activist in America. Now in today's news, Pope Francis has gone even further. Tell us what's happening at the Papal Palace.
Brad, there is cheering in Lavender City because yesterday Pope Francis spent 50 minutes, 50 minutes with one of the most high-profile LGBT advocates in the Catholic world. It's none other than the dissident nun, Sister Janine Gramick. And you can see her there in that picture with Pope Francis and her colleagues from the New Ways Ministry.
Well, Jules, maybe it took 50 whole minutes to have her recant her positions on all the Catholic teaching that she's jettisoned over the years. Can you give our viewers a bit of a backstory on this dissident nun?
Well, Sister Gramick is a real character. In 1999, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, it was then headed by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI. They sanctioned her for questioning, I quote, the definitive and unchangeable nature of Catholic doctrine on sexuality, and for causing confusion among the Catholic people. Those were the days, Brad, and they permanently prohibited both her and her co-founder of the New Ways Ministry, Father Robert Nugent, from a Catholic ministry, from any pastoral work involving homosexual persons, and this was for an undetermined period from holding any office in their respective religious institutes. Now, this goes even further because in 2010, the United States Catholic Bishops' Conference, which is considered fairly liberal, and this is now in 2010, under then President Cardinal Francis George, warned that the New Ways Ministry, I quote, has criticized efforts by the Church to defend the traditional definition of marriage as between one man and one woman, and has urged Catholics to support electoral initiatives to establish same-sex marriage. We're not talking about blessings. We're talking about marriage. That is what Sister Gramick and her associates have been pushing for a very long time. And the USCCB statement emphasized, I mean, look at this, listen to this, Brad, that the group has no approval or recognition from the Catholic Church. That was 2010. 2023, they are welcomed with a red carpet right in Pope Francis's papal palace.
And just to underscore, Sister Gramick is a co-founder of New Ways Ministry, so everything they're saying about New Ways Ministry is really right on her front porch. She's not really concealing her views on sexuality or using any code like Father James Martin, right? In fact, she's quite honest and open that she disagrees with church teaching and even claims Pope Francis is headed in that same direction. Have you checked that out?
Well, absolutely. In fact, she is calling for a radical revision of church teaching on homosexuality and now, of course, transgenderism. Listen very carefully to what she had to say in public at a recent New Ways Ministry conference. And mind you, the person introducing her was none other than James Martin. James Martin, may I add, in a COVID-19 mask.
We have a lot to thank Pope Francis for. We really do. I want to share with you what Pope Francis has said. Doctrine cannot be preserved without allowing it to develop, and that's an important verb, develop, all right? nor can it be tied to an interpretation that is rigid and immutable. Because if we do that, then we demean the work of the Holy Spirit. Pope Francis wants a magisterium. He wants the bishops, he wants the Pope, he wants archbishops, he wants cardinals, he wants those who lead the church. He wants a magisterium that listens to the church. The church is the people of God, and we've been told that from Vatican II, but I don't think we live that. But that's what Pope Francis is wanting us to achieve by initiating this synodal process, to listen to the people of God, because the people of God, that's the church. So he has no fear of the sensus fidelium, the sense of the people, the sense of the faith of the people of God.
Yeah, of course, you know, a good physician is going to listen to a patient, Jules, with regard to having, you know, what's ailing you and how are you feeling and all the, you know, the bedside manner. Of course you need to have that. You don't just hit someone over the head with a bottle of aspirin. If, you know, if their arm is broken, you bandage that up or you know, put a sling on it or whatever. So there is that right sense of listening to the patient. But at the same time, you don't listen to a patient, especially the sensus fidelium. I mean, they have to actually, if there's a true sensus fidelium, that's in light and in union with Holy Mother Church. That's in union with 2,000 years of tradition. That's not singing outside the choir. You don't have some dissidents claiming that they're, you know, the sensus fidelium and therefore they're the tail wagging the dog. I mean, this is all really messed up. Your thoughts on that?
Brad, notice that she's using the word develop. Doctrine develops. And Pope Francis himself has used this a number of times, as she herself points out. But this is code. This is an euphemism for basically changing church teaching. I mean, you know, slap on a bit of Newman, even though Newman himself was very clear about what development meant. Ironically, I was reading, you know, the challenges, academic challenges Newman received in his own day. And one of those challenges talked about, yeah, doctrine develops, but so does cancer. And the church grows, but there are also cancerous growths that need to be constantly excised and removed. And you yourself brought up the metaphor of a surgeon, Brad. So the whole business of development, and then she rightly, you know, she talks about, not rightly, she talks about listening to the sensus fidelium. And Pope Francis is doing precisely that in bringing together this allegedly representative synod, listening to them and claiming that this is the voice of God.
Now, let's get back to that meeting then with Sister Janine Gramick and the Pope. So regarding her private conference with the Pope yesterday, who else was present at that meeting?
Francis de Bernardo, who is the executive director of New Ways Ministry, a very, very vocal LGBT advocate. In fact, he recently published the book Marriage Equality, A Positive Catholic Approach. Marriage equality, right? They are calling for same-sex marriage and speaking as Catholics. The other person was Robert Shine, the associate director, and Matthew Myers, all of them with Sister Janine Gramick, meeting Pope Francis for 50 minutes yesterday afternoon.
Now, switching gears for a moment, Pope Francis also just gave another interview, an explosive interview talking about change. Can you tell us about that one?
Right. Pope Francis said the church has got to change because change is in favor of the dignity of the people. He said it's not just changing ways, it's about a change of growth in favor of the dignity of people. That's theological progression. of moral theology and all the ecclesiastical sciences, even in the interpretation of scriptures that have progressed according to the feelings of the church. I mean, he gave this interview in Spanish, by the way, to an Argentinian media, Telem. And it's very interesting that he uses terms like the feelings of the church. And Brad, we just did this Rome Dispatch a couple of days ago when we saw how he wrote the foreword for the Jerome Biblical Commentary for the 21st Century, a commentary that has both the nihil obstat and the imprimatur, and that is clearly promoting homosexuality by saying, oh, the biblical authors did not understand what a homosexual orientation is. And so it would be ethically irresponsible, their words, not mine, to take these texts from the Bible that speak against homosexuality and use them as clobber verses. Pope Francis also goes on to say in the interview, since the Second Vatican Council, John the 23rd had a very clear perception the church has to change. Paul VI agreed, just like the succeeding popes. So what Francis is saying, all the popes since Vatican II wanted radical change, and so do I, and we're going to have it.
Yeah, and we can all debate on what that change is. You know, what is it, something essential on church teaching or whatnot? I mean, it's really a kind of a Rorschach or an inkblot in all of that. Now that Pope Francis actually has just met with Sister Gramick, the co-founder of the New Ways Ministry, the question arises, is there some sort of alliance or simpatico spirit between the Synod and New Ways Ministry?
Sister Natalie Becker, who is one of the highest-ranking nuns at the moment in the Vatican and a big player in this synod, she delivered the Father Robert Nugent lecture earlier this year, in February or April 2022, actually. And we just talked about Father Nugent. He was sanctioned, banned from ministry by the CDF, but they have a lecture every year in his honor. And she went and delivered that lecture calling for greater inclusion. And she is now a big player in the Synod, Brad. So it just and they, people like Francis Di Bernardo and all, they have sent people to cover the Synod, put their own pressure. Father James Martin is very closely associated with the New Ways Ministry. So, you know, the links are undeniable here.
Now, you know, we're like about halfway through the Synod now. We're going to be coming up on a final draft of the synthesis of what all this means, or putting everything on paper. And although a lot is being kept secret, we know the names of 2 special secretaries who will be in charge of drafting that final synthesis report. What do we know about these 2 individuals?
Father Giacomo Costa, a Jesuit priest who was openly in favor of the, what we call here in Italy, the Zan bill, Alessandro Zan bill, which was about to be passed and then rejected by Italy's Senate. And this would have banned what the left-wing LGBT activists were calling trans homophobia. The Catholic bishops in Italy were very worried, and so was the Vatican, that this would really, you know, put Catholic priests in particular and Catholics in general in a straitjacket, because if you said anything, even from the pulpit, against homosexuality, you might be thrown in jail. But Father Giacomo Costa, who is now one of the drafters of the final synthesis, was vocally in support of that bill. The other priest who is also heading the drafting of the synthesis of what's going on is Monsignor Riccardo Battocchio, who is the president of the Italian Theological Association. And in 2015, he gave a presentation of a book called Homosexual Love that aimed to open up the discussion of the topic after the 2014 Synod on the Family.
So a couple real characters there. I mean, you put a lot of dots on paper and you have 2 different people to see how those dots all line up, and you may get different ideas at the end here on exactly where all this is going. Finally, Jules, just taking it home to you personally, have you been, you've been reporting on various papal signals and signaling, like handwritten notes and, to gay activists or public meetings with LGBT groups or co-founders. What do you think Pope Francis' strategy is in all this?
Brad, this is what I'm calling the semiotics of subversion. Semiotics is the science of signaling and the interpretation of signals and signs and symbols. And this is the term that I've come up with myself, but it's based on the work of a cognitive sociologist by the name of Aviatar Jeruvavel. He's a Jewish sociologist, very prominent scholar at Rutgers University. What I'm seeing is that Pope Francis, there's not much said. There doesn't need to be much said, because it's all done through symbols, through images. Notice the Vatican did not release the contents of the discussion, the 50-minute discussion between Pope Francis and Janine Gramick, but they released a picture. And then last year, Pope Francis wrote a handwritten letter to Sister Janine Gramick, congratulating her on how she had so valiantly fought the fight all this while. Then, a couple of days ago, there was the handwritten note to the other, was it Stan Zerkovsky in the United States, the other LGBT activist, handwritten notes to Father James Martin. Now, notice, Brad, all this is intentional. It is dramatic, it is symbolic, and it is always using a high visibility platform, the platform of the global media. We are part of that. And by the way, don't think that they are annoyed with our reporting. They are glad that we're reporting this, because it's giving them visibility. And even when people try to defend Pope Francis, it's giving him even further, it's giving these issues even further visibility. So what Pope Francis is doing is he's engaging in a kind of a semiotic asymmetry. There are so many issues going on, but suddenly by highlighting these LGBT activists and their meetings with them, the whole thing becomes asymmetrical, and the attention of the public is directed to these issues. Academics tell us, sociologists tell us, that this is precisely one of the strategies the homosexual movement used to normalize homosexuality. You know, every sitcom, you have a lovely gay couple. They are so funny and so intelligent, and they have a lovely dog, and you just can't help liking them. And then this is also glaringly disproportionate. And I mean, in simple language, Pope Francis is using a highlighter. And as Catholics are reading the text of a particular book, I'm using a metaphor, he's using a green or an orange highlighter to tell you where to look and what the where your attention needs to be drawn to. And this is what I'm calling the semiotics of subversion, the subversion of Catholic doctrine through strategic, carefully calibrated semiotics. But by the way, this is not random at all. It's carefully orchestrated, very visible, very dramatic indeed.
Well, while the synod lumbers on and on, it's interesting that during the synod itself, there is this flurry of notes and meetings with pro-LGBT activists, especially those who've been known to sing outside the choir on Catholic teaching regarding the immorality of active homosexual relationships. Is it a sign of things to come, or just mere coincidence? Either way, we must keep always in mind that popes come and go, but the truth and grace imparted by Christ to his church will endure until the end of time. We have that on his promise. As Pope Benedict XVI so succinctly noted, God wins in the end. Jules, thanks for keeping us up to speed on all what's happening in Rome and how it relates to the Synod.
Amen, Brad, and thank you for that.
Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.